CATT, Center for Assistive Technology Training Northwest.
Now I want to share a brief bio of our presenter, Dr. Yu-Ting Su. Dr. Ting is a teacher of blind and low vision students and coordinates the Northwest Center of Assistive Technology Training at the Washington State School for the Blind. She loves working with students of all ages, especially those with additional disabilities. Her mission is to advance teachers' proficiency with access technology, promote innovations in multimedia accessibility, and motivate the new generation of techie TVIs. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ting.
Thank you so much, Mariah. And I just want to give a huge thanks to Alaska and CSUN for having me present this information today. I always love meeting with this group, and thank you so much for having Cat Northwest here. That was such a nice introduction, and you guys are so professional about putting this on. I love that intro video. Great work. So, hi everybody, I'm Dr. Ting Su, and I hope you are all here for the webinar, The Low-Hanging Fruit of Assistive or Access Technology. I've got a little presentation today. We're going to move through the content at a pretty quick pace, but no worries. There is a link available where you can have a copy of today's presentation. That link will be coming to you into the chat, so anybody can download a copy of today's presentation. And this video will be available later, both from SESA as well as our Cat Northwest YouTube channel. So without delay, I'm going to go ahead and start my screen sharing here. Okay, so I'm here on behalf of the Center for Assistive Technology Training, specifically the Northwest CAT program. I have the pleasure of coordinating this program and also working with a great team of trainers. So just to recognize the other people on the team, Leslie Edmonds, who's an incredible trainer focused on the low vision technology, tech for CVI, tech for extensive support needs, and also Eli Sanchez, who does great trainings on all the non-visual tech. So as he says, if you can touch it or hear it, that's the tech that he trains on. So our program, Cat Northwest, we are based out of the Washington State School for the Blind, and you can find our website off of the WSSB website. So the link will also be put into the chat for you guys. And just wanted to let you know that we do offer all sorts of technical assistance. So if you are interested in technical assistance and you're in our Northwest region or California, you can go ahead and request that on our website. And definitely encourage you guys to follow us on the socials as well. So we're just Cat Northwest on the socials, and we always post information about our events there and just kind of fun stuff. Meow. Okay, so for today, we're going to be talking about the low-hanging fruit of access technology. There's that bit.ly link again if anybody would like a copy of this presentation. You can also point a phone camera in the bottom right corner of your screen, and there's a QR code that you can also use to grab a copy of the PowerPoint. So the whole purpose of today's session, and thank you all for being here, by the way, is to talk about how we get around these pain points of working with students who might not have that buy-in to assistive technology. And for you in the role of an educator or a parent or some sort of support person in this child's life, in a student's life, you know without a doubt that the student could benefit from some sort of assistive technology. But maybe the student doesn't want to use it. Maybe they're not ready for it yet. Maybe it's the IEP team who's not ready for it yet. So that's what we're here to talk about today, is what can be available and how do you scale up some of the easier access points to AT to the more specialized AT tools. So, I can't help but just make sure we're all coming at this from the same theoretical and philosophical background. So I really believe that our blind and low vision students need both accessible media and the tools to access that accessible media. So on the slide, I just have a little infinity symbol made with made with a light trails with a little sparkler. And that infinity symbol represents how integrated those needs for accessible media and the tools to access the accessible media are. So in other words, especially for a student who needs any sort of, talking or multimedia access, they need that media itself to be accessible. So websites have to be readable, curriculum have to be accessible. Um, but on the other hand, you could have the most beautifully designed accessible media, and if the student doesn't have the tools to access it, you're still not going to get very far. So you really need both the media and the tools hand in hand to have a really good system and plan for a student to access information in their world. Now, the importance of picking that low-hanging fruit, what is that importance? And this is just a little photo of a hand reaching up to pick maybe some Asian pears or oranges from a tree. Apologies, I'm not very good at fruit identification. But the reason why we're talking about the low-hanging fruit today is these are the tech that are free. They are available on demand, meaning that you could quickly turn on those access features off and on. This is also what I think of as the technology that requires minimal training, because it's all built in. And by extension, that means it does not require highly specialized tech support. So, the low-hanging fruit of AT, these are the AT that any sort of generalist tech support is fine. It could be a classroom teacher who uses that technology. It could be a parent who's pretty tech savvy. It could be a relative, a cousin, or even a friend who's tech savvy, because it's all tech that is available mainstream, okay? These sorts of technology are also really great for students to explore their needs and preferences for AT. So I find that a lot of times our students might be resistant to technology because they maybe don't quite know what they need, perhaps. Um, Maybe they have not yet trained their ears to listen to information. Maybe their fingers are not yet trained to receive information tactually. And so when those sensory skills aren't there, it's hard to have preferences for using those sensory skills, okay? So what we can do in the meantime is experiment with all the different multimodal strategies for accessing information. And this is really helpful because there's actually a lot out there that may not necessarily be specific to blind or low vision accessibility, but these are tools that have been used to meet needs with print disabilities. So in addition to visual impairments, perhaps dyslexia, or some learning disabilities. Some kids with ADD or ADHD might be using some access technology that can benefit our low vision students or blind students. There's also things that are built for neurodiversity and cognitive diversity and those needs associated with that. And so what's really exciting these days is that there's so much out there that is just ready to be picked off the tree. So some considerations when introducing any sort of either access or assistive technology, and you will notice that I'm using these terms interchangeably in this presentation, whether it's assistive, which implies a level of dependency on tech. There is a shift from assisted to access technology, with access technology encompassing all of those mainstream generic technologies and the more specialized things. When it shifts that emphasis from a sort of dependent model to a more interdependent model, where you're viewing the technology simply as a point of access to information. So I like this shift philosophically from assistive to access because it helps empower that student from the very beginning when you're even talking about AT, that you're empowering them to think about it just simply as access. And I think it's so important to involve that student right from the very beginning as well, because now you can make sure that you've got that student's buy-in at every step along the way of the AT journey. This means even starting at the assessment level, that student is involved in their own assessment of their technology needs, and they can start understanding how they might be able to learn and work more efficiently. Remembering that we always want to promote the power of choice. So what's nice about these low-hanging fruits of AT is that there's a lot of choice out there, and students can start to experiment and try to figure out what features of AT they really need and that they really want to look for. And just keep in mind that student preferences for technology will change as their skills develop. So, as they train their ears to listen faster, as they train their fingers to read Braille faster, as they train their eyeballs to be able to do visual scanning and use magnification differently, those preferences for what tools they use will change. So, keep in the back of your mind, as we're experimenting with these different flavors of technology, it's also about how do you scale up students' proficiency with using these technologies. Okay? Okay, so the next slide, just a heads up, it's going to have quite a lot of text. And this is meant to be a sort of reference list for all the different types of access technology apps that are out there already. And these are simply starting points for how you might introduce something really light and easy for students to use. So we've got a lot of reading apps available. There's the Google Chrome tool for reading mode. I'll show a little video on how that works in a little bit. The Bookshare web reader, that's available on any browser. So anywhere you can get on the internet, you can open the free Bookshare web reader and open some books. Of course, that does require a free Bookshare account by the student. There's also some nice free Google Chrome extensions, such as Kami or Read and Write. So these have like a free entry-level version, and then there's a premium paid version that offers more features. And then there's a couple reading apps, of course, that cost a little bit of money, but again, they're not necessarily specific to blind or low vision needs. And these are apps that are generally supported by, a range of AT specialists. Again, not necessarily specific to VI, but these are apps that help kids with any sort of print access. So that includes Dolphin Easy Reader and Voice Dream Reader, both available as apps or Chrome extensions and a little bit of a cost. So in addition to reading apps, there's also a lot of different features across a range of programs and apps that just have a little clicky thing, a little button that you can push and hit play. And now you've got different ways to access text on a program. So Microsoft Immersive Reader is right at the top of the list. That's available with Microsoft Online programs, Microsoft 365. On our smartphones, you've got Seeing AI and Envision. There's the Google Chrome app that's also available on mobile devices. And then there's these great groups of apps that are generally available for translation and teleprompter apps that end up having great value for some of our kids who want to experiment with different access modes. So these are really exciting. I especially love the teleprompter apps. And I really have to give credit to Veronica Lewis. She's got the website Veronica with four eyes, and she's got a great blog post all about teleprompter apps. And it's such a great hack. And again, so easy and doesn't require any specialized tech support. So for the remaining presentation, I'm going to move through just some different ways to pick that low-hanging fruit of AT to access text, images, and videos. So we're going to get started with text because this is the biggest group. So starting from the low-hanging fruit of TTS, also known as text-to-speech, there's a lot of built-in ways to access text-to-speech. And knowing what these built-in ways are really helpful if you want to start with that initial auditory training for students. So a lot of times students, maybe they're used to just, planting their eyeball right on the screen, getting very close. And that's just business as usual for some students who do that. And it's possible that, the only experience with auditory modes of access are just, in live situations with hearing what people are saying and listening to live instruction. But remember that you can read a lot faster using your ears than visually. It also helps with visual fatigue, those migraines that might be, a factor. And sometimes kids, even though you know in your heart of hearts that they could benefit from that auditory access, they are just resistant. And a lot of that has to do with their ears and brains are not trained to get information that way. So again, we want to empower the student right from the beginning to say, hey, next time you have to read a lot, or maybe you're feeling tired and you want to just kick back, just click this button and turn it on. So now that student has what I like to call on-demand access to using their ears or their eyeballs. They can kind of switch back and forth as they want. And the student is always in the driver's seat. They can decide when they want to switch to that auditory access. So this is what I call multimodal access in an IEP, because I want that student to have their materials in a specific format to allow for multimodal access. But remember, it's not just about the media, right? We also need the tools that will allow for multimedia access or multimodal access. So we might be introducing new ways of engaging with information for the student, whether it's, visually or auditory. And there's a minimal learning curve because it's as simply as just maybe highlighting something and clicking play. So once a student gets a little savvier with just hitting those play pause buttons, this will help justify some recommendations for additional tools for text-to-speech or using additional programs or other programs that have the text-to-speech features, okay? So what are some of the features, the differences in text-to-speech? We've got those features that we just talked about, those generic text-to-speech features, easy to access. However, there's limited language and voices. There are some voice differences where you can adjust for rate, speed, and pitch. Those generic text-to-speech tools are free or low cost. Remember though, that the generic tools will only read text on screen. So it's not going to read any buttons or menus or menu bars. It's only going to read the content that's in that particular app or program. But also remember, it's a very, very minimal learning curve, right? So quick on off, and it does not change how a student may interact with their device, okay? So that's looking at all those characteristics of using generic text-to-speech. So now if we look on the right side of the screen, these are some characteristics of the more specialized text-to-speech. So I will call this not the low-hanging fruit. These are like the higher, got to reach a little more to get these types of access technology. So these are specialized text-to-speech technologies, which we call screen readers. So as some of you in this audience might know who've worked with screen readers, there's a greater variety of reading languages, voices. Definitely you can move from just the generic, probably tap out at double speed to now reading at a much greater rate, like up to 900 words per minute, 600 words per minute, So greater reading rates, different variations in pitches. There can be an added cost, in some cases you get what you pay for. But in comparison to the generic text-to-speech technologies that only read text on screen, screen readers will read everything. So the buttons, the menus, the website bars. So this can help you decide, what power of tool a student needs, okay? Screen readers will also access alt text, so those image descriptions that might come with some digital media. And you've got greater navigation options on how to navigate what you hear across devices. It can also read continuously rather than just reading a paragraph at a time or a page at a time. Screen readers will just keep reading until you tell it to stop. It will change your device interaction though. So think about that learning curve and how different that learning curve might be when you need to support or teach a student using a screen reader versus just that generic built-in stuff, okay? So just take a minute and think about these differences and how these differences might play into when you might want to introduce something that's higher hanging. So when you might want to move from a low hanging fruit of AT to something more specialized and higher hanging, such as a screen reader. And I'm giving you a hint here. Think about these differences for an extra second or two, because there just might be a pop quiz as we go through this presentation, just to keep people on their toes, okay? All right, so a little bit more about these generic tools for text-to-speech. We've got lots of text-to-speech features in hardware. So for example, on our mobile devices, on our Apple devices, there is the speak text feature, and this applies to all text across any sort of app on your Apple phones. You can also make your Apple phone speak all, so speak all the text on a screen. So there's a screenshot of this on the right side of the screen, and it's just a screenshot of where you find this spoken content menu in the accessibility menu on an iOS device. So iOS including iPhones and iPads. So you can see that when you're in the spoken content menu, you can turn on speak selection, you can turn on speak screen. And I always just like to have these on all the time, so that feature is just right there and available on demand. To the right of the accessibility menu, there is a screenshot of the Wikipedia page for tsunamis. And this is an example of how I had, when I had a first grader with low vision, this was our initial training with experimenting with the text-to-speech option on his school iPad. For whatever reason, he came back from summer break obsessed with tsunamis and wanted to know everything about it. So it was a really fun activity to just look it up really quickly, turn on my, highlight the text, and, with my speak selection feature turned on, he could just find that speak button, click it, and then all of a sudden hear this paragraph about tsunamis be read aloud by his iPad. So, really kind of, you got to make it fun, keep it low stakes when you first introduce. And then on the bottom left of the screen, we have another screenshot, and this is from the Android menu. So in the Android accessibility menu, you want to go to accessibility and then look at installed services. And then there's an option to activate select to speak. And it all, functions very similarly between the different platforms. So we've also got text-to-speech features in desktop devices. So this is another set of screenshots from my MacBook. It's again called spoken content in the accessibility menu. And what's also nice, in addition to, of course, speaking the content when you highlight it or swipe down, what I really like about text-to-speech tools is that in a lot of the different tools for text-to-speech, as it is reading the text out loud, it's also highlighting the words or the sentences. And you can usually set that in the setting if you want it to highlight a word or a sentence as it's read out loud. So even for kids who maybe they don't want that auditory support in that moment, they can get a little bit more visual support to be able to track where they are in the text. Sometimes this can help with the reading fluency as well, because it's sort of like a metronome, when the text-to-speech is reading through and it's highlighting. So it can help with some fluency as well. Okay. Moving along, we've also, of course, got our Windows systems in hardware. So this is from a screenshot from a desktop Windows computer. And in the system settings, there is something you can choose for speech. And then under speech, there are some settings for text to speech. And this is where you can choose the voice, you can choose the speed. And the way it works in Windows is you can open any web page or a document, you move your cursor to the location, you click caps lock R, and you can hit the control key to stop speaking. So on each of the different devices, when you activate text to speech, Just know that sometimes there might be a specific gesture to use to activate the text-to-speech. Sometimes it's a key command. And in order to figure out what that is, what that recipe is for your device or for your student's device, it's just an easy Google search. So you just want to make sure you put in the device you're using and text-to-speech, and then, key command or gesture, and you'll find that specific one to your needs. Okay. Now, there are some really fun text-to-speech features in software as well. So on the screen, if you have a copy of the PowerPoint, there are embedded links in the PowerPoint that demonstrate the immersive reader in Microsoft 365. And then there's a second demo video that shows you how to use Google Chrome in the reading mode. And I love, love, love the Google Chrome reading mode, because this is sort of like the ultimate text-to-speech tool that's available on any Chrome browser. And if you think about how prevalent the Chrome browsers are, this means that a student doesn't even necessarily have to be on their own personal device to use this. They could plop on a library computer or a neighbor or a friend's computer. If it's a shared computer in the home, very easy to just open Google Chrome and activate that reading mode. So I am going to pop out of my PowerPoint for just one quick second, and I just want to spend a minute and a half showing you this little demo of how that Google Chrome reading mode works. Okay? So hopefully you guys are still with me so far. Let me get this shared. Okay. Bear with me, everybody.
Dr. Ting, while you're doing that, we did have one question that I know you might be addressing later on, but it was, is there a good assessment to figure out where you might start with the Access technology? Would it be part of the functional vision learning media assessment or something else?
Oh my gosh, that is such a fantastic question. So thank you to whoever asked that question. I so appreciate it. So it just so happens the quick answer is yes. So in the Access Technology for Blind and Low Vision Accessibility textbook that's available from APH, and if it's possible to put a link to that book, that would be great. There is a needs assessment process that I developed and published in the book. And there's a whole needs assessment template that is available from the book. So if you actually do a Google search for APH downloads and manuals, one of the first search results on that page will be a PDF from the AT book. So in the AT book, and this is a free download, you can download, it's one single PDF that has all the forms from the textbook there. But in that PDF, about midway through the PDF, I want to say it's probably around page 25 or so, you will find the needs assessment template. So that is what I recommend to even start identifying where and how to prioritize the type of tech that the student needs, and potentially where those priority areas of intervention are for technology. I also am a huge fan of integrating technology within a comprehensive evaluation. So, Adrian Amandi from California School for the Blind, he likes to call it the FVLMTA. And although that's a mouthful of an acronym, there are some strategies to weave in the assessment for technology needs within your functional vision assessment, learning media assessment, and assessment of the expanded core curriculum needs as well. So it's sort of a gumball approach to wrapping it all in. But there's also a template for how to do that and write that within your report in the AT book resources. Okay, so fantastic question. Thank you. Okay, I've got my video pulled up. Just gonna make that full screen. It's gonna start out with some upbeat music, so get ready, you guys. Let me go ahead and share that. Got my sound. Okay.
Reading Mode in Chrome browser presents web pages in a simplified format, removing non-essential content. With Reading Mode, users can enjoy a simplified and customizable view of the content they want to read. Reading Mode is available on Chrome OS, Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. To use Reading Mode, open Chrome and go to a web page you would like to browse. Then right-click on the page to open the context menu and arrow down to Open in Reading Mode. Alternatively, you can navigate to the Chrome menu by selecting the three-dot menu in the top right corner of your screen, then clicking on More Tools and selecting Reading Mode. For a more personalized Reading Mode experience, you can customize font styles, text size, color themes, line height, and letter spacing to meet your preferences. You can also adjust the side panel width so that Reading Mode can take up half or more of your screen. If you would like to keep the original web page presentation aligned with the simplified Reading Mode version, highlight any text and the other panel will scroll to your place on the corresponding page. Reading Mode is available in all languages that the Chrome browser supports, including French, German, Spanish, Japanese, Portuguese, Dutch, Korean, Italian, and many others. Now you know how to enable, customize, and use Reading Mode to meet your specific needs. If you have any questions regarding Reading Mode, contact the Google Disability team at g.co/disability support.
Okay, all right. So just wanted to give it a little idea of how easy that is. It's really just a simple few clicks. And again, this type of low-hanging fruit is low-hanging because anybody can activate it even without even specialized training. So, I think as a teacher of blind and low vision students, we're always a little stretched thin, and it really takes a community approach to get our students set up with technology, especially. Okay. All right, I am going to pop back into our little PowerPoint here. So just as a little summary slide, hot tips for finding these generic text-to-speech tools. Oftentimes, if you do a search for apps or tools or features for dyslexia, you'll get a lot of great stuff, okay? I also recommend exploring the educator and accessibility sections of our major developers' resources and their resource pages. So even if you just do a little, internet search for Google Accessibility, Apple Accessibility, Microsoft Learn Educator Center, you can find a lot of information about all the built-in, freely and easily available tools on each of these different platforms. Okay. Okay, buckle up. No, it's not time for the pop quiz yet, but be aware. We're going to move on to the more specialized flavors of text-to-speech, okay? So yes, this is going to be our screen readers. These are like the powerhouses of text-to-speech tools. So of course, on our PC and Windows platform, we have their built-in narrator, which is the default screen reader for Windows and PC devices. Because it's default, it is built in, and it's really made to navigate everything that, comes with the Windows device. Of course, we've got JAWS, so that is at cost, but there is a 45-minute demo mode that anybody can use when you download JAWS. So you can use JAWS, and honestly, this year is my 20th year teaching as a TVI, and that free version has always met my needs pretty well. For NVDA, that is another screen reader that you can download to your PC Windows device. It is free. I also like NVDA because it's really built for web navigation, and it's also portable. So it's possible to have NVDA on a little flash drive that you pop into somebody else's computer, and now you're bringing your NVDA screen reader with you. And we've got the Apple screen reader, so that's the VoiceOver. VoiceOver is called the same thing, whether you're on a mobile device or a laptop device, desktop device, I should say. And that is the default Apple screen reader. On Chromebooks, we've got Chrome Vox, and that is also the default screen reader there. I highly recommend Bruce McClanahan's documentation that he's made on using Chrome Vox. That can still be found on the WSSB website, by the way. And then for anybody who is on a smartphone that is of the Android flavor, TalkBack is the name of the screen reader that is on the Android devices. And I just wanted to be sure everybody was clear that it's a different screen reader for different platforms, because this will influence how you do your internet search when you need to look up a key command or a gesture or help on how to use a screen reader. Okay. Okay, drum roll, everybody. It is time for a pop quiz. So if you are on this webinar and you're at a computer or you're logging on a device with a keyboard, get ready. Open up that chat window. You want to make sure that your chat window is set up to chat to everyone and not just the host and panelists. So we are doing a little pop quiz on what are the limitations of generic text-to-speech. Do you remember? What does generic text-to-speech read? Does it only read text? Can you access images? What are the limitations of it regarding speaking rates or speaking voices? And how do you control text-to-speech? Do you need vision to control it? What does it read? Okay, I'm seeing some answers already. It only reads the text on the page. Yes. It does not read buttons. Yes. Only text, not toolbars. Yes. Limited language and voices. Yes. Yes, Sue King, only the text on the page. Ooh, great one, Michelle. It cannot access images and it cannot read those pop-up boxes. Excellent. Okay, so everybody is pretty clear that generic text-to-speech, the big limitation, that it is limited to reading only the text. And yes, Danielle, there are limited options for the rates, speaking rates, the voices, and languages. Great. What does this mean? This means that students do need to have a little bit of vision in order to use those generic text-to-speech features, okay? So already this is going to be one of your considerations in that kind of tech evaluation thinking, where if a student doesn't have enough usable vision to activate that play pause, that generic text-to-speech is not going to work for them, okay? So knowing what these limitations are, thank you all for playing, by the way. We want to know and teach the limitations of the generic text-to-speech. So this means we want to support the student in finding what the limits of the built-in access tech are. So if we know that the generic built-in text-to-speech is limited to only 2x, so speaking at double time, we want to get those students trained up to where they want to read faster. And maybe, the student comes to me and says, Ms. Ting, I want this to read faster and it's not going faster. Or I want it to read page after page and I hate having to click at the end of each page that I want it to read fast, that I want it to keep reading. I'm like, great. Well, you know what? There's another tool that will actually do this for you. And that's when I know they're ready to learn that screen reader, because they are ready for more, okay? So we actually want to help those students hit those limitations and access tech so they can be the one asking you for more. And, boom, you've got that student buy-in right there, okay? So this is also why we always want to support the student in making those informed decisions when choosing the most appropriate tech. Like, when is it appropriate to be using text-to-speech? Maybe when that classroom is really loud, maybe when the earbuds are dead, maybe that's when they really have to go with the magnification. Maybe magnification is better for math or, interacting with the spatial information. Maybe that text-to-speech is really more appropriate when they have to blast through really big chunks of text or reading, maybe boring reading, okay? And also when we're introducing the technology, we always want to teach the workflows. So we're not just teaching like the key commands for how to, activate things or operate the tool, but it's really, you're going to use this when you have a reading task to do. And so you're always thinking about how that tech fits into the larger task. So it's all about teaching the features of the tech that make sense for that particular workflow, okay? Okay, moving on to that more specialized tech though, remember when you have that specialized tech, it's a greater learning curve, right? Not to worry, our CAT Northwest program, we've got you covered. We've got a lot of resources. Not to worry again, it's amazing that Fusion, which includes JAWS and Zoom Text, is now available from APH, and APH has fantastic resources about it. So we have an AT resources website. That link is coming your way in the chat. And what we've done from CAT is try to grab all the available resources from APH and put it in one place so that it's like a one-stop shop for all the resources for every piece of tech that we support from APH. So there's a screenshot here from our AT resources website. It is open to the JAWS page on our website. And you can see that there's a section for getting started with JAWS, some initial resources there, including a great Hive course. Hot tip, it is taught by Cody LaPlante, who's got amazing resources for learning JAWS and screen readers, actually. Our trainer, Leslie Edmonds, maintains this resource sheet for every device we have. There's a YouTube playlist. There's FAQs, so frequently asked questions. And these FAQs are actually pulled from our Slack, where we support same-day question and answers to tech for tech support. I'll come back to this at the end of our training to talk more about how you can access our Slack platform. There's also a nice little IEP goal bank that we're growing. There's also quite a few how-to guides. There's resources on how do I navigate the Canvas learning management system with JAWS. Michael Cantino has some great related screen reader resources. And Freedom Scientific actually rolled out a JAWS chatbot where now you can ask some sort of AI machine like little questions about JAWS, but because that chatbot has been specifically trained with the JAWS information, you can rely on that information from this chatbot as being pretty valid, okay? So APH Access Academy, they also have a webinar on JAWS with the Google Classroom, really excellent. So, we all have our own pain points about what our students need with JAWS. So hopefully this is a great place to get you started. Okay, and yes, the JAWS suite known as Fusion, that is available on quota for our students, okay? Great. Okay, so we're gonna move on to images here and talk about the low-hanging fruit of magnification. So what are some generic tools available for magnification? Well, remember that with the generic stuff, the low-hanging fruit, it's great for that initial sensory skills training. So really great for that early on visual efficiency training, for students who maybe are just used to bringing the eyeballs on the screen or to the paper. Now it's like, oh, what can I see when I magnify? Oh, wow, I can use finer point markers to draw or color my pictures, for example. So again, keeping it fun when you introduce this initial type of technology. And we're always focused on empowering the student with what they can get out of multimodal access. Let's try these low vision strategies. You decide when you want to turn it on. You decide how you want to use it. So it's just inspiring students to engage with information in different ways. And again, minimal learning curve, and it can help you justify recommendations for more powerful and, costlier tools in the IEP when you have this history and almost proof of concept that the student can use this type of technology very successfully. Okay. Okay. So hopefully everybody is paying attention. There are some differences, just like there are differences between the generic low-hanging fruit of text-to-speech and the more specialized. Same exists for magnification. So our within program, native, generic, built-in magnification features, they're oftentimes embedded within a program. So that means no additional downloading. So, phew, that kind of resolves some IT pain points there. But understand that it usually only works within the program. So it's not going to work across different programs on a device. Similar to text-to-speech, it's only going to magnify the content. It's not going to magnify the ribbons or the menus. Because it is specific to a program, the key commands or gestures and how you use the built-in magnification, it might be different across different devices. It could also change the format or the layout and, resize the content. But, because it is just easily available, it's not going to change how a student has to interact with their device. So very kind of little baby mini learning curve, very minimal learning curve, okay? So then we've got the flip side of the specialized screen magnification tools, where it enlarges everything, including the menus and the ribbons. So think about what it is that your students need. Are they able to see the ribbons and menus? Do they need that enlarged? Specialized screen magnification tools also work across all programs on a device, which is really nice. So it's just always on or always off. There's also typically more powerful enlargement capability and usually slightly better resolution as well. As you get bigger, it can maintain that clarity of magnification. So there's usually also a broader range of features with specialized screen magnification tools. So, greater range of visual and auditory access. Some of the magnification devices have OCR, which stands for optical character recognition, so that it'll also speak the things that are magnified. There's also different visual filters that can be activated. But remember, as things get more specialized, it can also increase that learning curve of learning the technology. And it oftentimes does change how the device as a whole has to be interacted with, okay? So that's our summary slide of the differences and the different types of magnification. But let's talk a little bit more about that low-hanging fruit of magnification technology, okay? So I like to think of it as magnification on demand. So available when a student wants to activate it. We've got those within program or within software features. So usually you can look for a little bar in a program that maybe it's a slider bar that allows you to, increase the percentage of zoom. You'll find this even in, Google Docs or Microsoft Word. Any of your word processing programs will have some sort of zoom bar where you just can toggle that level of magnification up. If you're in a browser, Control plus or minus is kind of like the go-to key command. And usually in the settings menu, you can reset the default visual settings. So you can set those defaults so that when your word processing program opens, it will automatically open with a certain font size or style or line spacing, or, if you need the color contrast, that can all be set in the default settings of a program, which is really nice. On different types of hardware devices, of course, we have our spread and pinch, where you might pinch your fingers together and then you move the fingertips apart to make things larger or smaller on a screen. There's different key commands or gestures, and this is going to be different between different platforms and different devices, okay? Now, I do want to spend just a little bit of extra time on Chromebooks because this is such a typical technology in a lot of our schools. Did you know that there are 3 different ways to magnify on a Chromebook? I still have to keep this as a shortcut that I save on a note because I can't seem to ever remember exactly what these are. But just know that there are 3 different ways to magnify on a Chromebook. There's our classic Control plus or minus. There's Control Shift plus or minus, and then there's Control Search key M. So the difference is whether it makes the text big or small, does it resize things on a screen, or does it just make everything bigger but not resize? And you have to kind of scan around in a more like kind of on-screen magnifier style. So different ways to magnify, which is great that these options are available. Okay, drum roll, guys. I got another pop quiz for you. Okay, get those chat boxes up and make sure you're chatting to everyone. What are the limitations of generic magnification? What are the limitations and what it can magnify, the magnification capability? What about multimodal access? What are some of these limitations of the generic stuff, you guys? Yes, it only works within the program. That's right. And only maybe specific applications or web pages. Does not magnify pop-up menus or ribbons. Excellent. And it magnifies within the app only. That's right. So if you're using it within an app, you go to another program, no more magnification. And yes, Allison, it does not magnify toolbars. That can be a biggie. Okay. Well done, you guys. So now that we have all hit those limitations of generic magnification, and you have, of course, supported your student in hitting those limitations so that they can ask you for more, now it's time to introduce the more specialized magnification tools. So we have, of course, our video magnifiers, formerly known as CCTVs. The updated terminology is video magnifiers because there's many more ways to magnify things through a video feed. The lowest hanging fruit of the specialized technologies are the ones available from APH simply because they're available on quota. And we have all the training, again, try to aggregate all the training from APH onto our AT Resources website. So available from APH, there's Fusion, which offers both Zoom text and JAWS together, and you can choose to use one or the other or both. There is the VideoMag HD, which if you look on the right side of the screen, here's a screenshot from the Low Vision Tech page of our website. The VideoMag is this little blue handheld one, great for little preschoolers who are just experimenting. It's fun, easy, playful. The Juno is a smaller desktop size video magnifier, and this does have OCR integrated, which means it's got integrated text-to-speech. The Jupiter, our longtime beloved desktop CCTV video magnifier that folds out. And then there's a new one on the market from APH, and this is the Neptune. And the Neptune really is being marketed as a desktop reading device. So it is similar-ish in size to the Jupiter. It also folds up for portability, but the focus really is on it being a reading device and having the OCR set up there, okay? So great to know that all of these items are also available to borrow if you're in Alaska. So that's fantastic. Great. So, I just wanted to spend a moment talking about this idea of developing students' interdependence with technology and how this idea of moving from assistive, which is very much dependency oriented, to access technology promotes this idea of interdependence. So with interdependence, this technology can be used to support students' access to information anytime they want, okay? We now have more automated, non-visual access to images and video. This all requires a community approach. So this is, again, kind of strengthening that idea of interdependence where we really all need to lean on one another to get through life. And so with technology, that community approach is helpful for developing the tech itself. It's helpful for education about, how this fits our students' needs, but it's also helpful for advocacy and advocating for more accessible media and learning environments. So I know that there is quite a bit of research and quite a bit of community around developing technology that is going to support our students. Of course, everybody is talking about AI. That's the hot topic now. As you are considering how AI might fit into your teacher toolkit and also into our students' access toolkits, I really want to encourage you guys to think about how you want to integrate AI, but we need to keep the humans in the loop as well. So there's a nice research article that I put here with a reference. This was published a few years ago that just talks about the beginnings really of having humans in the loop as you are using AI tools. Know that AI is developing very rapidly. It's developing rapidly, but we always want to approach any AI tool with caution because they're not necessarily developed with blind or low vision accessibility in mind. So there might be some issues with bias. You always want to limit how confident you are with the answers that you get from anything AI. You always want to kind of fact check what you get. And you always want to be aware of some of the risks of using AI. So, again, we never want to use anything personally identifiable, remembering that our students can be identified with just 2 points of information. So we want to protect that privacy and, of course, be aware of the bias that exists that are not always pro-disability. Okay. And, when we're training students to use some of their tech tools, students really, truly should always be in the driver's seat. They have to know how to dictate their access. So, first it's choosing the tool they want. That's the most appropriate tool for the task. But as students move from our K-12 environment to higher ed, students now have to be able to dictate to somebody else, hey, I've got images in my textbook. I want these images with description. I want these images as a tactile graphic, or I need this image as a 3D model to help with my learning. So, all of this training begins very early on with students needing to understand how they need their information prepared for them, how they want to access the information so they can solicit that community support with it when they're still in that school system. And then as they move out of the school system, it's figuring out how to now create their own access points and their own alternate media. Okay. All right. I have the final group of technology that I wanted to present to you. These are our group of visual interpreter apps. So in the very beginning of that list of, low-hanging fruit, I had listed Seeing AI and those Envision apps. Those are some examples of visual interpreter apps where you can upload an image and get some access. And, we've got the Google browser now or Google app where you can upload an image and it'll identify the image and describe it for you. And so there's also more robust tools for that as well, once you move from that those generic access points to the more specialized. So I just want to make sure you're aware of this. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but it is in the deck and it's as a resource. So for anybody in this audience who's working with students who need some training on visual interpreter apps, and you're wondering which is the best fit for that student, know that there's a whole article that compares and contrasts the visual interpreter apps. So this article is called Need Vision on Demand, and it's written by Chancey Fleet, who is a blind technology trainer at the New York Public Library. And she is a very robust user of these apps herself. So I think it's a really nice write-up that helps you understand the differences that exist between the different visual interpreter apps. So I'm not going to read through each of the next slides, but I just want to click through to make sure you know that they're there. So of course, we've got the built-in ones, Seeing AI and Envision. They're free. Get that instant gratification, but they are completely AI driven, okay? We've got Be My Eyes, which is also free. You can get some AI generated feedback as well as human descriptions. TapTapSee is one that combines crowdsourced and AI, and it's figuring out what kind of tasks are best suited for each of these different apps. Be Specular is one that was free and it's no longer available, but I wanted to include it here just because, just so that you can understand the different features and affordances of different types of visual interpreter apps. Okay. And of course, we've got Ira, which is like the Cadillac of visual interpreter apps, and these are at a cost. However, if you are working with a student and you happen to be in one of the Ira Access locations, so they can try it out for free. So that's a nice way to try this more specialized technology for free. And we are wrapping up the end of our presentation here. Just wanted to let you know, since we've gone through technology for text and images, there's also some nice things to access video. Now talk about low-hanging fruit. Pixar and Disney, these are great low-hanging fruit of described video content. So they do their descriptions in-house, and it's part of their creative process, which makes their descriptions spectacular. I would even say that when I watch a Pixar Disney movie on with description, I actually prefer that experience rather than no descriptions. We've also got video descriptions available on all the major streaming services, so it depends on whether or not that show has made audio descriptions available. And the way you access that is actually in the captions menu. And you want to look for the option that says audio description in parentheses, and that's the video description. Some of the network TV, again, depends on the show, will also offer descriptions. And for anybody looking for educational videos, the Described and Captioned Media Program, DCMP, is fabulous. It's sort of like the Bookshare of videos. So it's free membership, and they offer a whole library of K-12 videos with captions, audio descriptions, and some with even ASL translation, which is really neat. And if you are working with any staff or parents who want to try their hand at describing videos or even live theater, DCMP has a nice resource called the Description Key, which offers great training resources for audio describers. So now you are in a position to train somebody else on description practices. So I know that there are a lot of YouTube videos that are used in classes and in school. My go-to tool still, this has been around for 12 years, is UDescribe. So udescribe.org, I believe. It is best used on the Google Chrome browser, and it allows anybody to record or add description to any YouTube video. So that's really neat. And students do not need an account to access the described video. You only need an account in order to record the descriptions. Okay. All right, you guys. So I didn't want to leave without sharing some resources. So we are now at the end of our presentation. I just wanted to remind people that we have our AT resources website from CAT. And this is just that one-stop shop for all the resources, for all the tech from APH. But sometimes you just might have a quick question and you need a quick answer. So we do have a Slack account, and so we have a Slack workspace for CAT. I recommend that you create a free account first, and then you can join, anybody can join our Slack at catnw.slack.com. And I just have a big screenshot here from our Slack just to give you an idea of what Slack looks like in case you're unfamiliar. You can also find the link to join Slack from our website. So thank you, Claire, for including that in the chat. So when you join our Slack, you will find a bunch of channels in one of the sidebars, and it looks like a hashtag or pound sign, and these identify the different channels. So the channels are named by devices, and right here in the screenshot, I have JAWS highlighted. So on the main portion of the Slack workspace, the JAWS channel is now open. And you can see that I will repost questions in the field here, and anybody can post a question and answer. So, Megan Berry, she's experimenting with JAWS Fusion and the online math program, Imagine Learning Algebra. And she's having some issues navigating JAWS with that math content. So she's like, help me. And I am sure one of our trainers will have this question answered today. This is actually a little bit of an anomaly. Usually people's questions are answered same workday. So this might have come in just at the end of the Friday, and we're playing a little bit of catch up this week. But there will be a reply here soon. So yeah, our Slack has been really nice. You can, I think we've got just under 300 people on here, and anybody can answer any question. So we've also got some technical assistance available from our main CAT website, which you all have the link for. And thank you so much, Humberto, for letting us know that you can watch any over-the-air Prime TV programming with audio description. So that is really nice. It just depends on the show. So with that, I'm going to close out our recorded portion of this webinar. Just wanted to leave you with my contact information. So it's just ting.siu@wssb.wa.gov. And of course, you can find and follow and subscribe to our CAP program on all the socials. And we've always got new YouTube content coming out. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for notifications when new training videos come out. So just thank you again, everybody, for coming to this presentation today. I just want to also acknowledge that we are based at the Washington State School for the Blind, WSSB, and it is with just wholehearted gratitude for APH for funding our CAP program and making this sort of presentation possible. So thank you very much.
CATT, Center for Assistive Technology Training Northwest.